Hey, welcome to the English Podcast Lab. I'm your host, Mike, and we've got Sarah here today as our expert to guide us through today's deep dive. We're going shopping.
That's right. We'll be diving into all sorts of useful phrases and vocabulary you can use when you're out buying things, whether that's in a store, online, or even in a different country.
Okay, so let's imagine we're in a clothes shop. What are some of the first phrases we might use or hear?
Well, you might hear a shop assistant ask, "May I help you?"
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you could reply with something like, "I'm just browsing," or "I'm looking for a new jumper."
So that "may I help you" is a classic.
Yeah.
Polite, but it also gives you a chance to say what you need right away.
Exactly. It sets the tone for a helpful interaction. And if you're looking for something specific, using phrases like, "Could you point me in the direction of," or "Do you have any?" can be really useful.
It's interesting how those phrases use could and would. They're polite and indirect.
That's a key part of shopping in English. You want to sound polite and respectful, so those indirect phrases are really helpful.
So you found that perfect jumper. But how do you make sure it fits? What are some key phrases for talking about size?
Well, first, it's helpful to know your sizes in general terms, like small, medium, large. And then for clothes, you'll want to be familiar with words like waist for trousers or inseam for the length of the leg.
Inseam, what exactly is that?
It's the measurement from the crotch seam down to the ankle, basically the inside leg length. Knowing this measurement can be super helpful when you're buying trousers online.
Okay, good to know. And what if something's not quite right? How do you say it's too big or too small?
You can say, "This is a bit too tight," or "This is a bit loose." Again, being indirect is often seen as more polite.
Right.
But you can also be more direct if you need to. For example, you could say, "Do you have this in a larger size?"
So we've covered finding things and talking about size. What about actually buying something?
When you're ready to pay, you might hear the assistant ask, "How would you like to pay?" This is where you can tell them if you'll be using cash, a credit card, or a debit card.
And if they don't ask how you want to pay, is it okay to just tell them?
Absolutely. You can simply say, "I'd like to pay with cash," or "I'll use my credit card."
So we've navigated the clothes shop pretty well. Let's move on to a different department. What if we're in a massive department store and completely lost?
That's where the phrase, "Excuse me, where can I find?" comes in handy. You can ask for specific departments like, "Where's the electronics department?" or "Where can I find the homeware section?"
It's like having a secret code to unlock the store's layout.
It is a bit like that. Each store will have its own system, but most department stores have clear signage and helpful staff who can guide you.
So far, we've been talking about shopping in person. But what about online shopping? Are there any specific phrases I should know?
Many of the phrases we've already discussed apply online too, but you'll also encounter terms like shopping cart, checkout, delivery, and online payment.
What about those buy one, get one free deals I see everywhere online?
Those are very common online. It's a way for retailers to attract customers and offer special promotions. You'll also see terms like discount code, free shipping, and limited time offer.
It seems like there's a whole new vocabulary to learn for online shopping.
There is, but once you get the hang of the basic terms, it becomes much easier. And don't forget, online shopping can be a great way to practice your English reading skills.
So let's say I'm brave enough to go shopping in another English-speaking country. Are there any regional differences I should be aware of?
Definitely. Different countries and even different regions within a country can have their own unique vocabulary. For example, trousers are sometimes called pants or slacks.
Wow. So even within English-speaking countries, there are these little language quirks. It's fascinating.
It is, and it highlights how language is constantly evolving and adapting. You might also encounter different slang terms or colloquial expressions depending on where you are.
So how can I prepare for these regional variations?
Watching movies and TV shows from different English-speaking countries can help you pick up on different accents and vocabulary. You can also look for online resources that focus on regional dialects.
So it's all about being adaptable and embracing the diversity of English. It's not just about learning one set of rules.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions if you're unsure about something. People are generally happy to help, and you'll learn something new in the process.
This has been a great overview of some basic shopping vocabulary. We've covered a lot of ground, from finding items to discussing size to paying, and even navigating regional differences. What are some key things to remember when putting all this into practice?
Confidence is key. Don't be afraid to use the phrases we've discussed, and remember that making mistakes is part of the learning process. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become.
That's such an encouraging message. So even if I make a mistake, I should just keep going and learn from it.
Absolutely. Every interaction is a learning opportunity. And remember, most people are understanding and patient, especially when they see that you're making an effort to communicate in their language.
This has been incredibly helpful, Sarah. I feel much more confident about shopping in English now. But before we move on, are there any other essential phrases that our listeners should know?
Let's talk about those tricky situations like returns or problems with your order. It's important to know how to handle these situations politely and effectively. Phrases like, "I'd like to return this item," "There's a problem with my order, and could you help me with this?" will come in handy.
Right. Those are essential phrases for any shopper, especially when things don't go exactly as planned.
Exactly. And remember to familiarize yourself with the store's return policy before making a purchase. This can save you a lot of hassle later on.
Okay, so we've got the basics down. We've covered vocabulary for finding items, talking about size, paying, and even handling those tricky situations. But what about the cultural side of things?
Ah, yes. That's where things can get really interesting. Different cultures have different norms and expectations around shopping. For example, in some countries, haggling over prices is common practice, while in others, it might be considered rude.
That's a great point. I've heard about haggling in some countries, but I never really knew how to do it.
It can definitely be an art form, but even if you're not comfortable haggling, it's important to be aware of the local customs so you don't accidentally offend anyone.
So how can I learn about these cultural nuances before I travel?
Doing some research online is a good starting point. You can look for articles or blog posts about shopping etiquette in the specific country you're visiting. You can also ask friends or colleagues who have traveled to that country for their insights.
That makes sense. It's always helpful to get firsthand advice from someone who's been there.
Another important cultural consideration is tipping. In some countries, tipping is expected in certain situations, like restaurants or taxis, while in other countries, it's not as common.
Yeah, tipping can definitely be confusing. I've had experiences where I wasn't sure if I should tip or not.
It's always a good idea to research the local tipping customs before you go, so you can avoid any awkward situations.
So we've talked about practical phrases and cultural awareness. But what about those times when things go wrong? What if I need to make a complaint or return something?
That's when it's important to stay calm and polite. Even if you're feeling frustrated, it's crucial to approach the situation in a respectful manner.
So even if I'm upset, I should avoid using harsh language or raising my voice.
Exactly. You'll get much better results if you explain the problem calmly and clearly, using phrases like, "I'm not satisfied with this product," or "I'd like to speak to a manager."
That's good advice. I tend to get flustered in those situations, but I'll try to remember to stay composed.
And don't be afraid to stand up for your rights as a consumer. If you believe you've been treated unfairly or received a faulty product, you have the right to ask for a refund or exchange.
This is really empowering. It's good to know that I have options if something goes wrong.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And knowing how to handle these situations confidently can make all the difference.
We've covered a lot of ground today. From basic shopping phrases to cultural sensitivity to handling tricky situations. It's amazing how much there is to learn about something as seemingly simple as shopping.
It's true. Shopping is a microcosm of culture and communication. It involves language, etiquette, and even a bit of psychology.
What's fascinating here is how all those elements come together to create a successful shopping experience.
Precisely. And the more you understand those elements, the more confident and prepared you'll be.
So before we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
Don't be afraid to practice. The more you use English in real-life situations, the more fluent and confident you'll become. Shopping is a great opportunity to put your language skills to the test and learn from your experiences.
That's such a positive and encouraging message. Embrace the challenge, have fun, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly. Mistakes are part of the learning process, and every interaction is a chance to grow and improve.
So far, we've talked about shopping in physical stores and online, but what about those times when you might need to make a purchase over the phone?
That's a great point. Phone conversations can be particularly challenging because you don't have the visual cues of body language and facial expressions.
Yes, it can be hard to understand someone's tone or intentions over the phone.
Absolutely. So it's even more important to speak clearly and enunciate your words carefully.
Are there any specific phrases that are helpful for phone shopping?
Definitely. When you first call, you can say something like, "Hello, I'm calling to inquire about," or "I'd like to place an order for."
That sounds simple enough. But what about when it comes to providing my payment information? I'm always a bit nervous about saying my credit card number over the phone.
I understand. It's always a good idea to make sure you're speaking to a legitimate representative of the company. You can ask for their name and employee ID number to verify their identity.
That's a good tip. I never thought to do that before.
And when you're giving your credit card number, speak slowly and clearly. Pause between each set of numbers to make sure the representative understands you correctly.
Those were really helpful tips. I feel much more prepared to tackle phone shopping now.
Great. And remember, if you're ever unsure about something, don't hesitate to ask the representative to repeat themselves or explain something more clearly.
So clarity and confidence are key for phone shopping, just like with any other type of shopping.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become.
This has been such an informative and insightful deep dive into the world of shopping in English. We've covered so much ground, from basic vocabulary and cultural etiquette to handling tricky situations and even mastering phone shopping.
It's been a pleasure sharing my insights with you, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to take their shopping skills to the next level.
Before we wrap up, I have one final question for you, Sarah. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this information?
Don't try to learn everything at once. Start with the basics and gradually build your vocabulary and confidence. Focus on one aspect of shopping at a time, whether it's finding items, talking about size, or handling payments. And, most importantly, be kind to yourself. Learning a new language is a journey, not a race. Celebrate your progress and don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're all part of the process.
That's such a great reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of perfection, but sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission to stumble and learn along the way.
Absolutely. And remember that language learning is a lifelong endeavor. There's always more to discover and explore.
So even if I'm not fluent yet, I can still enjoy the process of learning and improving my skills.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one giving advice to others about shopping in English.
That would be amazing. I can already picture myself sharing all these tips and tricks with other language learners.
I have no doubt you'll be a fantastic language mentor.
Sarah, this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of shopping in English. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm excited to put all these new skills into practice.
It's been a pleasure joining you, Mike, and I want to commend you for your dedication to language learning. It's inspiring to see your enthusiasm and curiosity.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate that. And I have to say that your expertise and insights have made this deep dive truly special.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. Remember that language learning is a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to fluency. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, practice your skills, and embrace the adventure of shopping in English.
And don't forget to share your own shopping experiences and language learning tips in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
That's right. We're all in this together. So let's support and encourage each other along the way. Happy shopping, everyone, and until next time, happy learning.